is live from my office. It is an honor to finally say hi. We've had some scheduling issues and some crazy things go on, but the great Peter Cuneo is here. And if there's a Mount Rushmore to CEOs saving businesses, you're all four faces.
Well, I don't know about that, but I've had a lot of adventures. It's true.
The book, pardon me, the new book is Superhero Leadership. This, of course, is a play on your time at Marvel. If I remember the story accurately, Marvel was going bankrupt. You went in. A few years later, you sold it to Disney for $4.5 billion. Not a bad turnaround.
You're slightly off. Marvel had just come out of bankruptcy
Okay.
when I arrived, and it is true that there were still a lot of people thinking Marvel wasn't going to make it and would go back into bankruptcy. That is true, but it had just come through a terrible 2-year period of being in bankruptcy, and so as you probably know, what my career has been around doing what we call turnarounds for
Yeah.
heavily distressed businesses, and Marvel is the one that gets the most attention. I've done 6 others though.
I can think of Black and Decker and Clairol and Remington. Um, and we were talking before all the travel you've done over your life. If you don't mind mentioning, how many miles are you sitting at?
How many miles am I? You mean that I haven't used yet?
Yeah.
About 2 million.
So if you've flown to 8 to 10 times more than that, 15 million or so, did they give you a plane at some point?
Now, you know the airlines, they're really they claim to be empathetic, but not too much.
Not so much. Well, like I said, I'm honored to have you here, and I love your story. And the point of superhero leadership, 28 ways to lead with courage, strength, and compassion, is to teach others through your experiences how to be better managers of people, no matter what you're doing in life, right?
Yeah, the book is really for a number of different audiences. It's it's first and foremost in a way for young people who aspire to leadership or people who are already in leadership positions that would like to get better. We never stop learning leadership, in my opinion.
Right.
I'm still, I won't tell you my age, but I'm well up there and I'm still learning stuff every day. So
Well, you
the
have
other
all
thing
your
is
hair.
the other thing
You
that
have a full head of hair, sir. That's annoying to me.
well, again, it's genetic. You know, you get your hair from your mother's father.
Okay, so I know who to blame.
So, well, you think about your grandfather, whether how he did at your age, and see if it matches up.
Right. Yeah, there you go. It's not a game show that's a whole lot of fun. In the book, you lay it out, and I love this narrative style, 28 cardinal virtues, short to the point chapters. You can pop in anywhere in this book, or you can read it cover to cover from front to back right away, and you will gain something immediately. The narrative style came to you how?
Um, I guess I've always, even from when I was young, been a storyteller, and and so on. Of course, I didn't realize it at the time, but so often like to talk about my experiences, good and in some cases not so good. I'm not perfect, for sure, and many of my 28 essentials I learned the hard way by making mistakes.
Sure.
And if you're honest with yourself, and sometimes that's hard, you realize you blew it. It wasn't someone else. It wasn't so-called bad luck. You blew it. And okay, you learn from it. That's really what I think. So of the 28, I don't know, I've never counted how many came from negative lessons or wake-up calls that I got as a leader, but there's certainly quite a few. And
Well, virtue number two is admit your mistakes because
yeah,
I've been on the radio.
yeah, well,
Pardon me.
and
It's a
you
good thing we
should
have editing.
admit your mistakes to yourself too, not
Yeah,
just
right. Admitting your mistakes is key. And I've worked for so many people who didn't have that skill,
right.
and they didn't see the negative impact of it.
Yeah, it's almost not a skill. It's what, a behavior, an instinct,
Yeah.
a mindset. I think it's just hard. Look, honestly, we're human and we all have our sort of cocoon that we live in. Where we have a self-image that's pretty good and we're happy with it. And when we mess up our self-image, it can be painful. And one of my other essentials in the book is find other peoples who will tell you the truth, even when
Right.
it hurts. That's very hard to do for people, and no one wants to listen to when they messed up. But actually, we learn more from our failures than we do from our successes.
And having people tell you the truth is interesting because another virtue that popped out for me was number four: listen, even if you don't know the answer. One of the most influential people in my life, I came in, I was 22 years old, I suppose. And I came into his office. He was the general manager of this particular radio station, 95 SX in beautiful Charleston, South Carolina. We were a huge hit. And for whatever reason, I had an issue on a particular day. And at 22, I went to him and I was complaining.
Mhm.
And he had a smile on his face like you do now. And I got through my complaining and I said, well, I don't understand what's funny about this. And he said, right now you're whining. He said, I want you to go home and I want you to think about what you're asking me. And I want you to formulate an answer of how to solve it. And when you come back to me and tell me what your solution is, we'll come up with a way to solve this together. And it's one of the great lessons of my life.
Yes,
Don't go to somebody else and just bitch. Go to somebody else with an idea about how to fix what you're asking for.
absolutely. You're wasting time just bitching. You've got to fix the problem because there must be a problem. And so, another one of my essentials is has to do with problems is, you know, I I basically welcome problems. What I really keeps me up at night is the problems that I don't know about. And I know they probably exist because they always do. So I've always felt that I could solve, or with the help of other people, a team of good people, I could solve just about any problem if I
Sure.
knew about it. And often when I went to these companies at first, I would say to the organization, bring me your problems. And of course, you know, a lot of them didn't believe me, naturally, and that's fair, but bring me your problems. If you want to get in trouble with me, don't bring me your problems.
Right. Yeah.
So
And I think that's key too, because the employee responsibility piece of that, the managerial folks under you, their responsibility is to be honest about what they're dealing with, not to let it build up and then come to you with a true crisis.
I agree completely. And so it's you know, and unfortunately, if you have people that just can't abide by that, then you have to make some changes. But look, it's not easy. Success is never easy, particularly in what I do, which is, turnaround situations like a Marvel. Marvel had came out of bankruptcy, but it had lost a lot of the top talent during the 2 years of bankruptcy because, frankly, top talent could get good jobs someplace else. So one of our problems, we had many, was getting some of that talent, particularly in comic books, to come back. In comic books are about the hardest thing, honestly, to write, period. Harder than a novel, harder than the script for a film, because you
Interesting.
have to balance what the characters are saying and what you're looking at, on the page. And you usually have, not always the case, but often somebody's doing the illustrating is different from who's doing the writing. The third part about a comic book that's very interesting is the cover page. The cover of a comic book can make or break the comic book. And there
That's
are
your lead. That's the thing that people are going to see and it could trigger to buy.
and right, and there are people, very talented people in comics, artists that do nothing but covers, and they are paid a lot of money to do that.
Right. Because they're the kind of the quarterback, I suppose, at least of the creative process, or maybe the star wideout. At any rate, when you were at Marvel, a great story that popped out. A lot of people didn't have faith in Robert Downey Jr. as Iron Man, did they?
This comes from the fact that I'm a big proponent of all my turnarounds that I went into. The culture, the value system of the organization was broken. I sometimes say bankrupt, and you had to, change, evolve the culture, which again is not easy. And just because you tell people our new culture is XYZ, they're not going to believe you until you, as the leader, demonstrate that you weren't kidding by your actions.
Sure.
And the it wasn't just me. I had a great board at Marvel and some great executives as well. But the culture for Marvel was clearly going to be, we are going to change the rules of the game. We're not going to publish comics the way others do. We're not going to make movies the way others do. It's going to be different. And so people often ask me, well, what's a couple of examples of how you change the rule of the game? And it's true, to your point, one of the ones that I do like to talk about, which I think illustrates my point very well, is the casting of Robert Downey Jr. as Iron Man, Tony Stark. Because a little bit of background, we had just formed our own studio. This is 2006. We created Marvel Studios. Okay. Before that, we had been very successful partnering with big studios, not to criticize them. We had X-Men, we had Hulk, we had Spider-Man. They were all huge hits. So we had good partners, but we thought we could do it even better by ourselves and frankly make more money because we were
Right.
keeping all the money for ourselves, not sharing.
Sure.
So we created Marvel Studios and we raised $550 million to finance Marvel Studios. And essentially, the first film was coming up and it had to be a hit. And we decided the first film would be Iron Man. And so we were having a board meeting in New York, and the people running Marvel Studios, they were based in California naturally, came into New York for the board meeting. And on the agenda was, okay, what are we going to do for Iron Man? And they started with, well, we want to cast the best male actor in Hollywood. And of course, the board, and at this point, I'm no longer CEO, I'm vice chairman of the board. Okay.
Okay.
And our board was maybe, I want to say 9 people at the time. And we're all, wow, okay, who? And they go, Robert Downey Jr. And all of us are like, what? What are you talking about? Because he had his mugshot had been on every conceivable media
Yeah, there
outlet
was no secret to the
around the
personal problems
world.
he had at that
Yeah,
point.
a couple of months before. And yeah, he had a lot of personal problems. And so we were obviously initially no. And so to credit the people running Marvel Studios, they said, we knew you'd feel this way. So we asked Robert to screen test. And they showed us Robert's screen test. So the screen test was the opening, I want to say, 8 or 10 minutes of the Iron Man movie. And
Significant.
he's in you. I don't know if you ever saw it, but he's in
Sure.
Afghanistan. Okay, he's in the Humvee, and he's quipping with the woman army driver. Being Tony Stark. He's got a drink. He's got a
Sure.
cigarette. Okay, and they get hit, and leads to him getting a new heart. But basically, he's on script for the first 4 minutes, and then frankly, Robert's greatest talent, he goes off. He
Right.
goes off. Just forget the script. He's doing the part, and he became Tony Stark. I still believe he is Tony Stark.
Right. 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 And we
He
need him now
became,
more than ever.
and so the lights come up, and the entire board is, including me, are going, do it. Now, no one would touch him at that point. He was toxic, okay? And no one knew for sure what they were going to get. Everyone would have agreed he was one of the great male actors in Hollywood, maybe the
Sure.
best, but certainly one of the absolute top 2 or 3. So we knew what would happen, and the rest is history. It worked out super well. Robert is still playing Tony Stark, Iron Man, although he got killed in the last movie. But if any of the fans are worried about Marvel, he'll be back. Don't worry.
Do you
Marvel makes too
have
much
any
money.
relationship with him at this point? Because I would think that would be a pretty significant memory milestone for him.
Yeah, I've never talked to him about it. It is interesting. And by the way, but talking about a good actor, who just got the Academy Award for Best Supporting Actor? Robert Downey Jr.
Yeah. And it's
So
not like the talent's gone.
no, 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 no. The talent never left. It was always there. So, and I have heard, I don't know, that his wife was super important and supportive of him, you know, coming back.
His
And
wife, I don't know him well. I've crossed paths with him many times. Incredibly nice man. Undeniably one of the greats of all time. Someone who you really feel was born to act.
yeah,
But he will credit his wife every minute of every day to
yeah.
that she saved his life.
Well, I've heard that not only heard that he said that, but I've actually heard it from other people who do know her fairly well. So I'm that fits with, what I've heard and come to believe.
A great woman can change everyone's life, as you well know.
Absolutely. I've got one.
Yes, I know that as well. Let me shift gears in a different direction here with all the travel that we talked about that you do in the new world we live in, where everybody wants to live on a Zoom call. I'd much rather be sitting in one of those comfortable chairs behind you and talking to you face to face. And I know that you are a guy who will fly to London or fly to LA, so you can have that face to face experience, whether it's meetings or a podcast or whatever. Do you think this generation understands it? And what are they missing if they don't?
No, no, they don't understand it for sure. One of my themes on, I have two podcasts. Season three will be starting in a month or so. I've got, the book. I've got other things I'm doing, but I'm talking a lot about young people not learning leadership. And there are many reasons, but this, to me, the single biggest one is they don't live in the real world. And the real world, to me, is getting face-to-face experiences, dealing with, communicating with a diversity of other human beings in a diversity of situations, personal, professional, academic, whatever it takes.
Completely.
Yeah, and that's the only way you really, in the end, learn the instincts of leadership. You learn how to deal with other people different from you, but influence them positively. Get them to come to your point of view if that's what you're trying to do. And of course, that's what a leader does by definition, all the time, all day. And the kids just have no clue. We have lots of other problems besides the lack of face-to-face. Technology, your cell phone, of course, is the enemy of leadership, obviously. You've got overparenting. I could go on and on. Our,
Yeah, no, listen, you're just checking my boxes.
yeah,
I'm with you
our
every
culture,
single one of them. And I'll
our,
say this, as this work from home thing got legs during COVID and everyone wanted to continue it after. I said many times on the air, I said, if you are a kid and you're out of school, go to work. You are going to have such a leg up on everybody who wants to stay home and doesn't want to interact. Go to work, learn from the people who are at work, and your career will advance exponentially more quickly. Sometimes wondered if I sounded like an old man on a porch waiting for my lemonade to be brought to me. But the system worked. The system wasn't broken. And I don't think you could advance a company, and I don't think you could advance as a human being, which is what your book, Superhero Leadership, is about. I don't think you can do it without that face-to-face experience.
so it's very interesting. I didn't really, I, when I've been doing these speeches for over 20 years now on leadership and talking about the 28 essentials and so on and so forth. And when I decided to start giving speeches around the world, this is over 20 years ago now. First one was when I was CEO of Marvel. I was really concerned, well, what am I actually going to say about Marvel? Because and I decided I would just go through my entire life from when I was very young and try to think about when did I learn about leadership and how. And I tell the story that I got on a plane, 11-hour nonstop plane to China. And in nine hours, I was in a trance and I came up with these 28 essentials. This is over 20 years ago. Now, the essentials have changed slightly, obviously, in 20 years. A couple I eliminated, some I've added, of course. But basically, I started when I was 8 years old and went through my whole life and suddenly realized that the experiences I'd had were teaching me leadership, even if I didn't even know what leadership meant.
Sure.
The just real fast. When I was 8 years old, I was living in New York City in the borough of Queens. My father was a lieutenant in New York City Fire Department, but he was also a naval officer in the reserves. He had been in the South Pacific in World War II and so on. And he was called up to go in active duty in the Korean War.
Okay.
And so we went from as a family, we went from New York City to Pensacola, Florida, and then we went to Bremerton, Washington, which is across the bay
Wow.
from Seattle,
Corner to corner.
mothball fleet taking a carrier out of mothballs. Then we went to San Diego, of course, maybe the biggest Navy town in the country. And then we went to Philadelphia because he did some work even after the war was over in the Philadelphia Naval Shipyard. And then back to New York City. So in 2 years, I did fourth and fifth grades elsewhere. I lived in by coincidence, think about it, it's the four corners of the United States.
100%.
I never thought about this till 20 years ago. And, and, and basically, I had to make new friends, and adapt in every location, but it was not a problem. It was, and I actually enjoyed the travel. We drove across the United States several times, and I enjoyed, you know, just new experiences. And I
You
could see,
survived, you thrived, and you learned from each experience.
and even though I was young, I could see even in the United States there were regional differences in thinking.
Right.
And again, did I think about it consciously? No, of course not. But that's how it all started for me.
Well, it's
They,
interesting too because respect for your father. My father was a World War II vet as well, and the dysfunctional family upbringing. That nonetheless, the great pieces of respect I held for him were his patriotism, his service to his country, his work ethic, and even though he didn't sit me down by watching, he taught me how to be a man and what I feel are still the responsibilities of being a man today. And what I hear you saying is in watching your dad go through this stuff in his career and how he took it on, you'll learn by watching.
learn by watching him. Do you know what it's like when you're 10 years old and you get on the captain's gig, the boat, and go out to a giant aircraft carrier
Pretty
and
cool.
go up to the officers' mess and have dinner with 50
Oh
other
man,
officers and you're 10 years old? Believe me, you never forget that.
that had to be fantastic.
Yeah, and
It does bring up a key question, I think, that you covered in different places throughout your career. But all of us have mentors. All of us have people we look up to. All of us have somebody who, along the course of your career, changed your life. Maybe it's your dad. Maybe it's an uncle. Maybe it's not a relative. Maybe it's somebody you work for. Who's that person for you?
well, there's not one person, there's a multiplicity of persons. I was very blessed because and I've had a very diverse life. So, besides traveling a lot when I was young, I grew up in New York City. I went to public high school in New York. I went upstate New York to Alfred University. I have a degree in
Sure.
ceramic engineering. From there, I worked at a fiberglass factory for a year. And then I went into the United States Navy as an officer into the Vietnam War. I did two tours, learning more about leadership for sure there. Then after that, I went to Harvard Business School, which I never expected. I didn't even know Harvard had a business school. And if I hadn't gone into the Navy, that never would have happened. And then I started working and got my first turnaround. I got thrown into by my boss, who I I was in shock. I had no idea. I didn't think I had any skills at all. That's one of the many examples where my boss saw something more in me than I saw in myself.
And then you have an opportunity to rise to the occasion or not, and clearly you did.
Yes, although I often share with the first 6 months on that first assignment, I was depressed. I mean, I wasn't going to shoot myself or anything, but I didn't feel I had, any real skills. And then we started to get results. And when I really thought about my role in it, I realized it was a leadership issue.
Was there somebody before that, even as a kid? Was there a teacher or someone in your schools, and you obviously went to a lot of different schools, but there's somebody who saw something special in you to encourage you?
Yeah, there were quite a few. I actually was a person though that was always told, for example, in high school, I wasn't living up to my potential. So I'm a person, and I always have to fight this. I have many flaws, but one of them is if I'm interested in something, I'm I'm all in. I mean, I'm an encyclopedia. I'm A plus if it's school. I'm whatever. If I'm not interested, I'm basically a zero. And you can't go through life, frankly, that way. So in high school, for example, I took chemistry as a sophomore. I got 100. I was told I was the only sophomore in the history of the school, which had been around 100 years. It's New York City public high school, 4,000
Wow.
students. I was told I was the only one who ever got 100. But at the same time, I was getting 65 in Spanish. And because unfortunately, I should have been more interested looking back than I was. But language wasn't something I was interested in at the time. So you had this dichotomy, and my advisors were tearing their hair out with me. And this happened on a lot of grades. That's just one example. So I had to learn, even though I wasn't interested, I had to do my thing, you know, and what have you. And what happened on the first turnaround is we had a great success. So the company said, Peter, we have another one for you. It's a bigger one. And by then I had gotten addicted to
I bet.
the excitement, if you will. Drove me crazy because most people would never take these jobs I took because I'm not totally rational. There's a lot of risk, okay, and a lot of
Of course there
stress,
is.
okay. But I was now addicted to the natural high I would get from success, working with a team of people and a diverse team, and being successful. I didn't need drugs. I just needed these
You
challenges.
needed to go to work.
That's right. That's right.
When you look back at all of your success, and all of it were earned, and all the great people you worked with, and the people that work for you, I always think part of growth as a manager too is when you look back and go, if I could do one thing better, I wish I'd done this. Is there any of that for you?
You're not going to believe this, but let me put it this way. I have no major regrets in my life. I
God
have
bless you.
I have plenty of minor regrets, of course. And by the way, yeah, I certainly made some whopper of mistakes in my life as well. So I guess you could look at some of those and I could tell you that I wished that had done something different. But I recognize in certain cases my strengths were my weaknesses. I just had to find the right situation for me to be in to thrive. And that was degree a lot of uncertainty, a lot of jump at the problems, fix it. I'm a fixer by nature. I love fixing.
Sure.
And I had to find the particular situations where I could really shine, and I did. Some of them I was thrown into. Another quick story that might relate here is how I got into Harvard Business School. So I was in the Navy for 3.5 years. I was on a guided missile destroyer. These qualifications won't mean anything to you, but I was fleet officer of the deck. That's qualified. I was one of the ship drivers. Captains don't drive the ships anymore. Naturally, they have someone else, which takes a lot of practice and a lot of time. These ships are very big, and you're 24 years old, and you have the responsibility for 300 sailors, 20 officers on this big ship. So I was comm officer, communications officer. I was damage control officer at a different time. Uh, I was a air qualified air intercept controller. I could control our jets when they went against the MiGs over North Vietnam if they needed me to. It wasn't a primary duty, but I loved the Navy. It was everything that that talk about being in your surroundings where you're going to shine because you love it. I loved it. And at the end of my time, it was about 3.5 years. I was going to get out. I was a reserve officer. I was not a regular commission, someone who went to Annapolis. And the captain of my ship said to me, "So I got great news for you, Cuneo. The Navy wants to give you a regular commission and stay in and make it a career." And I was thrilled. I had just gotten married about 6, 7 months before. And I went back at the particular time my ship was home ported in Pearl Harbor. This was between tours. I mean, excuse me, after tours. We were in dry dock for a couple of months actually
Right, right, right.
for repairs. And I said, honey, great news. We're going to stay in the Navy. And she looked me square in the face and she said immediately, you stay in, we're divorced. Because she had been talking to a lot of the other wives of the at that case it was only men on ships. And the wives of a lot of the wives had said, if your husband stays in, he will go to sea 6 months a year and you'll raise the kids alone. And she was not going to go for that. And I loved her. I loved the Navy, but I loved her even more. And guess what? It's 55 years later. I still love her just as much.
It kind of worked out, didn't it?
Yeah. So I went back to the captain and he said, okay, what are you going to do? And I hadn't really thought about it. And he said, you should go to Harvard Business School. And I thought, this is another example of someone seeing something in me I didn't see in myself.
Right.
And I said, honestly, I'm not an Ivy League type. I'm from a middle class in Queens, you know. I'm not a genius. I'm not from a rich family, all these stereotypes I had about the Ivy
Sure.
League. And he said these words to me, you know, which I still think about almost every day, which was, Cuneo, you don't know how good you are. And I didn't take him seriously. I thought he was just being nice. I'm I'm going to shorten this. I could go on for another 10 minutes. But
Okay.
basically, because of his support, his pushing me, I applied, and it's a lot of ins and outs, very interesting, and I got in. And I was suffering from imposter syndrome when I showed up at registration. I thought
Right.
they pulled out the wrong letter out of
They're going to find out I'm
one,
here.
yeah, one pile was rejections, the other pile was acceptance. They must have just reached in the wrong pile. I shouldn't be here. But guess what? After 3 months, not only did I know I should be there, I did very well. I had academic honors. I was president of the International Business Club, and needless to say, it was a great experience for me and changed my life.
One of the things that jumps out in talking to you, and I think it's one of the things you hope people get from the book too. Every day is not sunshine and puppies, but the more positivity you can bring to your life, the more positivity you're going to get out of your life. And you seem like someone who has an optimistic attitude about things. And I think that's probably helped you an awful lot along the way.
I credit my mother completely. My mother, if we were Catholic, which we weren't, but she would have been sainted because she was a saint and she was very optimistic. And that, she told me every day, Peter, you can be whatever you want in life. You can do whatever you want. And even when I got old enough to know, no, that's not really possible, it still gets to you emotionally. And so I always had an optimistic view of the world. I was always willing to take risks, you know, always assuming things would work out,
Sure.
always looking at jobs that no one else would take, and so on and so forth. But I credit her every day growing up. That's what I heard.
You had, and I know you know this, in certainly in reflection, we all figure it out when you try to figure out who your parents were. Your parents were way ahead of their time in taking the interest they took in you and the support they gave you, and your father even including you in that dinner in the mess hall, things like that. Those are things not everybody did of that generation at all.
Yeah, but you know what? It's interesting because we were out of that greatest generation thing. My father was a vet, World War II. We were in a new development in the early, 1950s in Queens, and everyone on the street, most of them were vets from World War
Sure,
II with their young families. And so there was a very you'd get the sense anytime about how, we won the big one, we're great, but here are the things you talked about, your father teaching you how to be a man and giving you values. That's what was happening in my neighborhood because these vets, were they Army, Navy, it didn't matter, Air Force,
sure.
they all came out of that struggle with the same collection of values, of principles. And so I will tell you, I think supporting the family and and doing the things that my parents did, I think a lot of people were doing it. I really do. I don't
Well,
know.
that's enlightening to hear and good to hear. One of the things you cover in the book is know when to go. So we're going to go now, but I want to mention a couple of things. Your co-author is a man named Joe Garner, who I've known for many years, and Joe is terrific. And I hope you enjoyed working with him because he really can help propel a story.
I met Joe originally as the producer of one of our podcasts, and
Okay,
now two podcasts. And uh, he of course it we after I got to know him, we naturally talked about books. Joe has had 6 books on the New York Times bestseller list. And so here is a talent I was lucky to be able to work with. Thought one of my great problems that I have to fight all the time is I'm fundamentally impatient. And you can't write a book if you're impatient. And by working with Joe in the way we did, it made it all, frankly, pretty easy. And we had my life story and the principles I want to do, but we also had his writing skills.
sure,
And he didn't just take what I said, he recorded what I said and wrote it up, but then he inserted in that write-up some things from him,
right.
which actually in many cases improved the book. And then I would, read what he did and do a little editing. But basically, that's how we put it together.
Yeah, he has an innate ability to whoever he works with to find their voice and to be able to write in their voice very closely. So couldn't be a bigger Joe Garner fan. As I couldn't be a bigger Peter Cuneo fan. It's an honor to meet you. Thank you for all you've done, the jobs you've provided, the lives you've provided and helped,
All
and the
right.
work you continue to do.
All right.
That's the book, kids. If you're watching on YouTube, go out and get it. If you're not, it's Superhero Leadership, Peter Cuneo, Cuneo. Thank you, sir. I enjoyed this.
Thank you, Steve, very much. Thanks for having me. Hope to see you again soon.
Stay healthy and happy.
All right. You too. Bye-bye.
Thank you for listening to Live from My Office, a service of Monkey Run Productions. All rights reserved. The podcast is hosted by Steve Cochran, and it's mixed, edited, and produced by me, Ross Cochran. Steve is available for corporate speaking gigs. He would love to MC your event, and occasionally, he's funny. Thank you for listening. Head to cochranshow.com for more.